Did work. Yeah,
there we go.
Thank you, Helen. And hi, everyone. Pleased to meet you. I'm Grant, joining you from Sports Interactive, the makers of Football Manager, if you didn't know that. Pressing my own things. A little bit about me. Joined the company 21 years ago now, in 2001. Started off as a C++ programmer, working on CM0102, which is one of the sort of classic old versions of the game, Championship Manager. I worked on a couple of other titles that we did. I worked on the Xbox port, I worked on a version that we did for Japan and for Korea, and then I worked on Eastside Hockey Manager, which is basically like a version of Football Manager, but it's ice hockey. It kind of worked, and it kind of didn't as well. We had a problem with the NHL and a few other things that basically kind of stopped it from really taking off, and after a couple of releases we decided to can that. But as part of my role on Eastside Hockey Manager, I was doing a bit of organisation. I was starting to liaise with Sega, who are our publisher, and when Eastside came to an end, Miles, the boss, said to me, look, you were really good at that. Do you want to just do that for all of our games? We literally Googled what that was called, and it was a producer. So I became the first producer for the company as well at that point, which was great. Since then, the production team has grown absolutely massive. I was the first one and the only one for about 10 years. Became senior producer, and then we created a new role at the start of 22, which is head of production, and that's where I am at the moment, with about 17 producers in the team, of which 4 are my direct reports. FM UI UX, so everything to do with the screen. FM gameplay coders, which basically deal with all the in-game interactions and the sort of manager to player stuff, press conferences, transfers, shortlisting, that whole thing. Rule groups team, which is the guys that basically take the research from around the world, all the various leagues that we do inside Football Manager, code it into the game, make sure that's all working correctly and interfacing well with the database. And also recently I've taken on shared tech as well, which are the guys that, as you could imagine from the name, work on the platform layer. So anytime we add a new platform, PlayStation or Xbox, whatever, we've got a separate team that interfaces and deals with all that, but also they have to then work with the other teams that I mentioned, and so that's why it's come under my remit. A little bit about me there. That's when I was 7 years old, just after I'd moved to Morpeth. There's actually a Commodore 64 there that I was completely hooked on. I've lived in Morpeth until I went to uni, sort of 18, 19, and I went over to Manchester, and then I lived in the south for about 18 years, mostly in London, but 5 years ago I managed to get back to the Peth, which was great. It was always in the back of my mind to try and get back up north. I managed to twist my wife's arm, and my kids, well, they're so young that they didn't get any say in it, but they're Geordies now, so it's all good. I'm into cycling, gaming, and science fiction. As you probably guessed, I'm a fan of Newcastle. I collect Newcastle shirts, actually, which is one of those things that you think, oh yeah, I'll just do that as a little side thing. It takes over, honestly. I've got about 150 of these shirts now. And in case you haven't heard yet, we made it through to Wembley. Absolutely delighted with that. And actually, just today, I've had confirmation that I've got a ticket as well, so I'm going to the match. One of the perks of working for SI, I suppose. Bit about SI itself. We're based at the former media centre. We're actually in this building here. Look at just on the canal. You can see that's the Olympic Stadium there, and the orbit and that. That's in Stratford. We are up to just clocked on to about 280 team members in the group, and 130 of those. An amazing statistic, this. Joined since April 2020, just at the point of lockdown. 46% increase, so you can imagine the expansion that we have seen in the last couple of years. I love this one as well. Permanent tenure at SI, 21% 10 years plus. Not bad, is it, for a turnover? And 7% are 20 years plus, like myself. We did a recent survey, as we do periodically, and this one was in December, and got a really good rating, 91% saying they're proud to work at SI, so that's pretty cool. Team structure. I'm amazed I was allowed to put this in, but the COO said, yeah, go ahead. We've got SLT, Senior Leadership Team at the top. It's got all the directors in it, Creative Director, Development Director, etc. DLT is the department leads, of which I'm one. And we act as an interface, basically, between the people managers and the SLT. And then the people managers themselves manage the technical leads and the coders, the artists, and everybody else basically comes down underneath. We've got various committees at the side, worth mentioning. Social, women at SI is a big thing. Diversity, accessibility, etc. all have their own little managers and have a good interface with the rest of the group. Next slide, please. A bit about FM23. I've got to say quickly, we just came out yesterday on PS5 and it's working. You know, if anyone in the room has got it, sorry about the trophies not working. It wasn't our fault, honestly. But trophies are working now. Leaderboards, they're also working as of today. We actually hit 12 SKUs, 12 formats in stores this year, as you can see right across the board there. Game Pass day one, we were first time on Apple Arcade, which is sound like hotcakes. It's great to see. And as mentioned, PS5 as well just came out yesterday. It was actually ready to go last December when we launched a lot of the other SKUs, but there was a problem. It happens in the games industry. I've seen a couple of titles that actually have never been released, never saw the light of day, even though they were almost complete. And I was worried about PS5, but it turns out we managed to sort out the legal wrangles, and there you go, it's out there. A few stats, I won't go into all the details, but yeah, we're heavily researched, right? One of the big things that we added this year was we've got the Champions League license. So when you actually start a Champions League game or a Europa League, or you get the music now comes out, and you know there's dedicated cutscenes. The team use the assets wonderfully, so it's really nice to see that one done. And this is what I'm supposed to be talking about. Remote working. So I'm going to sort of talk about what happened before the pandemic, a little bit about during the pandemic, and then a little bit about now and looking to the future. I was one of the people that was an established off-siter. Basically, I moved back up north about 2 years before the pandemic hit. At the time we had 12 overseas, 15 remote, quite a small amount in the studio really. We looked at the applications on a sort of case-by-case basis. It wasn't just a guarantee that you'd be allowed to work remotely fully, and they're the 4 areas there. Individuals' needs, managers' needs. Have you got the tools? Can you get the tools, the hardware, etc.? Things like dev kits, test kits. And then in an agreed process, we actually sat down and say, how are you going to work? What are you going to do? How's it going to change that your working practices? Get it written down, get it all agreed. The model assumed that the team members would come into the studio when required, team planning days, one-on-ones, etc. Although each team was given a little bit of autonomy to manage that how they saw fit. My personal agreement was to visit the office fortnightly, so every 2 weeks I went down, had one night staying in London. And when I was there, I met all my direct reports, which was about 12, 13 coders at the time, and I met with my line manager, the dev director, and also the studio director, Miles. Little did I know that everyone else would be doing that in about a year's time because of that little baby. Present day. So I knew this didn't really come out. It's such a great slide. You know, in the draft, I had this as its own thing, but basically this is a chart of sales for, I think it's active users, something like that, starting from 2012, 13. So the different colours are the different versions of Football Manager, if that makes sense. And up here you've got the number of active users. So you can see as all the versions have come out, guess what that is? That is the pandemic. You know, everyone was at home. What do people do when they're stuck at home? They play games. So we had a huge spike at that point. Can we have one every 5 years? You know, pandemic. And then we, not quite the same as it went in, but we've retained a lot of users. So we've kept on carrying up like that. And so far, FM23 has done pretty well. One of the important things to note in this lockdown period is we actually completed 2 games. And if you look at the actual timings, a lot of that was done under full lockdown. No one was in the office at all. It was completely done remotely. So what more do you need to sort of say, we can do this remotely? You know, we don't necessarily need the office because we've just released a game that actually went on to be one of our biggest sellers. However, as things returned to normal, we adopted a full, flexible working policy. We don't ask anyone to come in. If they do not want to come in, they're under no obligation at all to come in. As it turns out, on most days, about 30, 40 people come into the office. It's a big office, it fits about 200, so on those days it's quite like a ghost town. But we do have days where we encourage groups of teams to come in, and then it can surge up to about 100, maybe 150 if it's like a quarterly meeting, or you know, we have AMAs, that sort of stuff. Hiring, we still consider remote work applications case by case. I know it feels to me that the industry's changing a bit, and you know, I think I read a statistic that the number of jobs on LinkedIn, etc., are actually coming down. The number of ones that say 100% remote working is an option. So maybe that's one of the things that's changing. But for SI, it's absolutely on the table. We've now got 80. If you remember, it was 16 before. We've now got 80 that are fully remote or international. Ireland, Sweden, various places all around the country. Just literally, we had a guy who's joined. He's in Anglesey in northwest Wales, and he just never wants to come. He said to me, "Look, I'm just not interested. You know, I want to do my job." And he's done brilliantly. He's just coming up to his probation end. No complaints I have at all. He's a nice guy. He just doesn't care for offices. From my personal side, I now visit once a month. I sat down with the dev director and said, "Look, I don't think I need to come down every 2 weeks. You know, I'll come down once a month and I'll have 2 nights in the office. I do my train travel and hotel costs are all claimable expenses, and I do a similar thing. I say to my direct reports, look, I'm coming in, why not come in? We'll go for lunch, we'll do our one-on-ones in person, I'll say to the boss, to Miles, are you in the office this week? Yeah, oh, I'm on Thursday, cool, I am as well, let's meet. It's very ad hoc, none of it's mandatory, but usually people do make the effort and they come in and they think, right, I'll do it as well, I'll match what my manager is doing. So, in practice, and I just wrote down a few things, pointers, methods might help you guys when you're thinking about setting this up, whether it's from a managerial or from an individual sort of perspective. You've got to maintain that contact, personal team-wide contact. I have a booked in one-on-one with all my direct reports, 30 minutes. Some of them take 5 minutes. There's one guy, Ollie, he's a 5-minute, he's just not really interested in chatting about football so much. But what I do, I think I made a note, I encourage people to make a note of non-urgent topics through the week. And I'll say after we've had a little bit of football banter, I'll say, have you got anything on your list? Is there anything I can help you with? And quite often people say, I want to just check this and check this, check this. And they know it's a dedicated opportunity. And in some ways, it's almost better than how it used to be in the old days where, it was ad hoc. You might lean across to someone's desk and say, oh, I've got a problem with this, and they might be busy. Or in this case, they know it's a dedicated 30 minutes. I will not be looking at anything else on my screen. It's just for them, and it really works. I have the senior managers. Where am I here? My line manager, exact same thing, 30 minutes. And I've also got the other senior producers from the games that I don't work on, Football Manager Mobile, for example. I have a 30-minute chat with them as well. Fit them all in the week. I tend to do it over a couple of days because they can be draining. There is definitely such a thing as Zoom fatigue. I found when I first started setting these up and I was doing one every day, it became wearisome, and that's not fair for the person. I've got to be fresh, I've got to be listening to them, attentive. So I put them into one day, or 1 or 2 days now, where I'm in that mode. And we're okay. Somebody pulled the plug. Is that my 15 minutes up already? We use Agile, which I expect you guys know what that is. Probably a lot of you use it. So we've got daily stand-ups running as part of the sort of sprint process, scrum process, and in our Teams calls. There was a lot of debate about cameras, and in the end, we made the decision for cameras to be on, and it makes a difference. I guess people have to look even sort of remotely kind of like they haven't just got out of bed. We've designated Friday afternoons as Focus Fridays, which it's the alliteration as well. The lady before about the Wednesday, we did it with the Friday, Focus Fridays. No Teams calls are booked at all after midday unless it's absolutely urgent. You've got something that's important to discuss. We've got Teams chats. If you set up a meeting, you get the Teams chat. We encourage that to be used. And like I say, it's not always just about work. We use that for a bit of football banter, and we say, have a good weekend, and how was your weekend, and all that sort of stuff. And in addition, I've got to put this up, because everyone's wondering about these two cuties, right? This is a list of non-work things we have in our team system. So anime, bargain basement, where people put stuff about cheap graphics cards and that, football, electronic music, gaming, etc. Pet picks is far and away the most popular one. People put stuff, and we have a pet pick of the year, and this was the winner for 2022. A guy called Alex at our work. That's just wonderful, isn't it? It's cat and his dog. He said it's very rare to actually catch them like that. Usually they're tearing strips out of each other. And then a little bit about looking forward. We're basically going to have to formalise it in some way. It's a policy thing, right? We've got such a large amount of people at the studio. There's a lot of questions that are percolating up. For instance, a good example of one I was talking the other day with someone is, at what point does the distance from the office become an off-site thing? Because obviously in the old days we all paid for our commutes, we all paid for our train tickets, etc., bus passes, etc. Whereas if you were given off-site status, you then are able to claim that back on expenses. But how far from the office does that line hit, or is it a gradual thing? That's the sort of thing that we're talking about at the moment. Eventually, I think we'll agree on something formal through HR, and that'll be an actual, policy that we roll out. Cool. What did I put more? I think there's something else. Oh yeah, usual thing. It's a plug, right? We have got a bunch of open positions at the moment. Huckleberry Tech is our partner, and Laura Hetherington. I thought she might be here today. She lives in Newcastle. Also, I couldn't resist getting the old "Would you like to know more?" in there. So. If you're interested, have a look at that. I think it's just a thank you. Yeah, thanks for listening. And thanks for supporting the North East, Ukie. Absolutely wonderful. I love this sort of stuff. It's a great part of the country. And the more that we can big it up and keep the the buzz going in this area, the better. Thanks all. Yeah.